Welcome to Christian Parent Crazy World, the podcast that tackles tough topics to help you be a godly parent in an ungodly world. I am your host, Catherine Seegers, and in today's episode, we will tackle this very timely and festive question. How can we plant the seed of giving in our families, in our kids this Christmas in a way that they will never forget? You know, as parents, I think most of us are very concerned about all the commercialism we face at Christmas time. The true meaning of Christmas, the great gift of Jesus coming to the world, can get lost in all the celebrations and services and cooking and our own personal gift lists. What is the antidote to all that? Giving. We all know the verse, "'Tis better to give than to receive," but how do we focus on giving in a world that is so focused on getting? Today, I want to tell you about a way that you can give as a family that will plant the seed of generosity in you and your kids for a lifetime. Now, that is a very tall order, but I have a guest who can fill it. That's the plan for this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World. So let's get started. Joining me today is Brian Frazier, Executive Director of Team World Vision, which is a program that mobilizes individuals in very creative ways to help end the global water crisis in Jesus' name. Now, World Vision, for those of you who don't know, is a Christian organization that helps children, families, and communities overcome poverty and injustice. World Vision's impactful work is in over 100 countries. That includes clean water projects in Rwanda and the first Christian radio station in Mongolia, and helping families herd goats in Zambia and providing protection, food, and shelter for refugees from the Sudan. Now, we're going to discuss how you can integrate generosity into your family traditions using their gift catalog featuring over 100 charitable items and sponsorship opportunities that you will never forget. Now, you may have seen that gift catalog online this time of year. It is so cool. You know, I don't think any of my kids could tell you much of what they got for Christmas last year, but they do remember what they gave through World Vision last year. This was truly the highlight of last year's Christmas in our home. I want to share that with you today. And along the way, we are going to learn about what God is doing all around the world. I know you're going to want to be a part of it. So let's jump right in. Brian, welcome to the program. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited. I'm so excited to talk to you today. You know, I was praying last Christmas time. It was coming up to the Christmas season. We always like to do some sort of giving experience as our family. And I was like, Lord, what can we do this year that we haven't done before? And I always get your gift catalog in the mail. I'd seen it online several times. And I'm like, oh, this is the year. I really felt the Holy Spirit put it on my heart. This was the year that we should give to World Vision. And not just do it as my husband and myself, but bring the kids in on it. So I want to talk about this gift catalog and all of the amazing giving opportunities that you can really plant seeds in the heart of a child through your gift catalog, because my kids remember it and they're excited this year. Oh, what are we going to do this year? It's so beautiful. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get to that, tell us about your family first and then how you came to work for World Vision.
Sure. I love it. So I am married to my beautiful bride, Colette. We've been married for 23 years. We live in Houston, Texas. We have 4 children. I have Corbin, who is 21 years old. He's a senior at Texas A&M University, and I have a second son, Haddon, who's 19 and out in the workforce. And my third son, Kai, is 17. He's a freshman also at Texas A&M. And my daughter, Naya, is 11, and she is in 6th grade. And we're just loving the warm weather here in Houston. I hear it's cold in other places. But, looking at how our kids' lives, we've bounced around many different places all over the world as we have raised our children. And I've worked now at World Vision for, it's going on almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years here in just in a smidge. My background, my career doesn't make any sense, as God often is working in these places where I started out as an engineer early in my career, felt God calling me into other things. And after going back to school, I took a short-term study abroad trip to India. And it was in that trip to India that I just really felt God speaking to me and giving me a heart for the poor in ways that he never had before. And it was shortly after coming back, you have that phone call with your spouse and you're like, God's doing some things. But our hearts were already in the same place, knowing that God could do some crazy stuff in our life. And so what ended up happening was I ended up taking a role with an Indian bank. And after going to work there, we just literally sold everything that we owned, sold our house, picked the kids up, and got on a plane and moved to Bangalore, India, where I then worked for this bank. And this bank was specialized in working with the poor and in poor communities. And it was there that God just completely changed my worldview and began just transforming me into a new person in so many ways. And it was at that point, during that journey, that I knew World Vision did some similar work all over the world and does microfinance as part of its broader holistic approach. And it was eventually got the opportunity to move back to the U.S., back to Houston, here where I live now, but get to implement all the best practices that I was learning in India all over the world. And so for 6 years, I then led out a lot of our operations programs in many different countries, about 30 different countries where we were implementing these programs, and got an invitation to go run a race with Team World Vision, which is a ministry of World Vision that invites people into taking on crazy challenges to run a race or hike a mountain or hike a canyon or swim across a lake. And got invited to do an event out in Portland, Oregon called Hood to Coast, where it was co-partnered with a former professional athlete whose name is Lopez Lemong, two-time Olympian and former lost boy from South Sudan. And it was in that calling, I was reading Lopez's book. I was on my way on a flight actually to Rwanda as I was working in our microfinance division, and then realizing, oh my gosh, God is stretching me here. I loved it, following God's work, doing it, implementing all these things, using the skills he'd given me. But I just, in the same time was saying, okay, anything, I can do all these things, Lord, but just don't ask me to invite others into this journey too. And so what ended up happening is I read that book. I'm full on in tears at this moment. So adoption is actually a big part of our family's lives as well. 2 of my kids were adopted. And I'm reading this, part of his story around, as he was adopted by American parents at 16 years old and moved back to the U.S. And I'm just reading this moment where he suddenly realized that his birth mother was actually alive, that his mother was alive, even though he had been, stolen out of her arms by other soldiers and then lived in a refugee camp for 10 years. So as I'm reading his story, I'm just like, oh gosh, God, you're doing something inside my heart. I can do more. And that was the beginning of a journey that God brought me into, of taking me from being an engineer to a banker to now inviting others and leading out this ministry at Team World Vision, where we invite others to do a lot of fun and crazy things. And this whole time, my family has been on this journey with me, my kids, which I love to share more about too. So that was a lot.
That is an amazing journey. Isn't that the way God works, though? It's like, it used to be back in the day, people would start a certain career and they end their lives on that same trajectory. And yet in our modern world, that happens less and less. And your story is beautiful. So there's so much I would love to dig into there. I'm going to have to pace myself here. But I love, you brought up the Sudan, and I want to talk about that in just a little bit, because your magazine that came out, which I told you before the show, that should come with a box of tissues. Your magazine, so many beautiful pictures, just looking through it with my children to see these other children around the world that live so differently than we do, and educating my kids. have the means to pick up and travel all over the world with my 5 kids at the moment. Although, you were talking about India. That is one thing that is big on our heart. Our church does a lot of world missions trips. And my oldest son, who is 17, actually, he's going to be 17 this next year. He's 16 at the moment. He wants to go to India on his first missions trip. So I'm hoping and praying that's going to happen. Our church goes there every year, sometimes multiple times, and other places around the world. So I would definitely encourage listeners to think about when your kids are getting older, think about short-term missions. And that may be a gateway into longer-term missions like what you're doing. But India has always been huge on my heart. It's a culture that I really love. I know that you guys have boots on the ground. Like, how many countries is World Vision in?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we are in over 100 countries. And so and some of those countries are some of the toughest places in the world to work. And that's what I love about World Vision is we're not afraid of going where God is at work and working in those tough places. And so as you're reading a story about Sudan, I mean, we are there in terms of the humanitarian emergency relief in that situation that's going on.
Oh, definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit about what World Vision is and its founder, Bob Pierce. Talk about how this organization came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started in 1950, and which means that we're coming up on our 75-year anniversary next year. We've got some big ways we're planning to celebrate that. And it started in Korea, really the aftermath of the war there. And Bob and his huge heart for the lost and for just children who are in dire situations, exactly as you were describing it start out there. And as he was, traveling across Asia and came up seeing these children who are in these circumstances, soon realized that he could make a difference and that the gospel itself had a huge part to play in how we can help bring these kids and their families and these communities up out of poverty and give them the tools that they need to succeed. And so that in so many ways, we can see them thrive on their own and see churches thrive and these communities thrive long after we're gone.
So coming up on 75 years, congratulations for that. That is amazing, amazing work. I love your world footprint, over 100 countries now. That's truly amazing. I was reading about so many of them in your magazine, which I want to get to in just a little bit as well. But that is quite a legacy, 75 years of ministry around the world. And let's go ahead and talk about the catalog. That's what introduced me to you. I would see these advertisements particularly coming up on Christmas time it's called a gift catalog of things that you can give to the missions work that World Vision is doing around the world. And so last year, like I said, we sat down with my kids and we looked through your catalog, and in here you have gifts starting at $25. And let me just mention this, by the way, I've had people who come on my show that pay to come on to advertise what they do. That has happened from time to time. That's not what this is. And I don't want it to sound like that. I reached out to you guys because it was such a blessing to me and my family and planting a seed of generosity in my kids, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the wrap up, how that seed was planted in my heart from my parents. And that's our job as parents, to plant these seeds into our kids that the Lord can use throughout their lives to bless them, because we see in Scripture, it's so clear that it is a mandate from God that when we have means, when we're given much, much is required of us, and we're required to then turn around and bless others. We're not blessed so much here in the West just so we could hoard it all and keep it to ourselves. We're blessed so that we can bless others. People around the world that find themselves in these dire situations. And if you get your hands on this magazine, let me tell you, you're going to want to give. But the gift catalog was really cool because you could start with gifts at $25, which I'm looking in your gift catalog right now. It's 2 chickens. I'm like, wow, that really changes people's lives though, because that's going to keep blessing them on and on and on. You can give like a goat and 2 chickens, or you have different packages here. I think we did one last year. It was like a goat, 2 ducks, 3 rabbits, 4 chickens. You can do that, which is super fun for kids. And then at the same time, I love this. You've got these scan codes here where you can go and learn about the people and the communities that you're giving to. So this is an educational experience. At the same time, your kids are just getting so excited to learn about these other cultures and people that they're able to help by being generous, what the Lord has given us. There's also in the catalog, like Hope for Sexually Exploited Girls. We can contribute to women around the world and girls around the world that are in very dire circumstances. We hear about it on the news all the time. And how can I help? Well, I may not ever have my feet on the ground in one of those places, but I can give towards that. You also have like water systems. There's so many interesting things here. And that's another one that's got a scan code where you can go and learn about how that transforms a community when you can give them clean water. Many of these people have to get up and walk miles and miles just to get their water for the day and come back. But I've covered a lot of ground here from
but I love all of them.
Protecting girls. I think you've also got like school supplies in here around the world, global hunger crisis, other necessities, healthcare. Talk about, and feel free to share any personal stories.
Oh gosh, I'd love to. So many.
Yeah, I think those are the most fascinating for people, and particularly our kids. Talk about some of these these areas where you have boots on the ground and we can contribute.
Oh gosh, this is such an exciting topic, especially when we talk about with our kids. You were talking about protecting girls. As a father of an 11-year-old, I have been in situations where we work, and even the connection with clean water, where, providing clean water, we don't really realize when you said how it can really revolutionize a community, it can revolutionize a household where that child, and normally it's the girls who are going out to walk an average of 6 kilometers to go out and get dirty water. They're bringing that water back with them. They're using it to drink, cook, clean with, wash their clothes. But at the same time, those girls are being put in high risk situations. They're out walking alone, and then they're coming back. It's early in the morning. It's late at night. It's impacting their school. They're not able to go to school if they're sick, and because they're drinking this dirty water, which is often causing dysentery and other waterborne illnesses. So clean water, child protection with our girls is an important part of my life too. I was literally in Rwanda recently, sitting with a father who was telling me the story of how the family cow, so this family had a cow, would no longer drink the water that they were bringing back. And that was kind of a point of desperation for him, where he just didn't know what to do because his family was getting sick, the cow was getting sick. As we have kids, we're now connecting the dots into that situation of like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what I would have done as a father in that situation where you've really run out of options. You're doing everything that you can to provide for your family. And it breaks your heart to be in that situation. But in that case, World Vision had come in. It provided a clean water source for their community. They are no longer having those issues. The daughter is now able to go to school, where we're also working in her school and providing them with a lot of the curriculum that they use, and training the teachers in the school, provided some funding to help build the building that the community partnered with us in. Those types of things are all what can flow out of the gift catalog itself as you're going to choose what that might be. And I was even just recently in Tanzania this past summer, where with my youngest son, Kai, who is 17 years old, we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and got to, what an incredible experience to do that with one of your children, where probably one of the most difficult things he had done in his life, and get to share that with Dad. It was just an incredible, special, I'll never forget, one of the, so important to me as a father type of moment. But immediately after we then went into the communities where we got to see a lot of this work being done, where even like a goat, you had mentioned a goat, where for $85, you can change a household and completely, where we had, met with a family that we were there and got my son Kai to see that, just providing a goat can provide almost a gallon of milk every day. But then it's planting that seed that you were just talking about too, where, now they can have some better subsistence for, just nutrition for the family, but then also now begin to have more goats and to share those with their neighbors, and to just begin to see the beginnings of that family begin to flourish was really special for us.
I know. And you can read all about that in the World Vision magazine, which we keep mentioning. And by the way, that's free. You don't have to pay for that. You just sign up and you guys send this out for free and you get to read all of these stories. There was a story in there. It's called How Goats Brought Back Their Smiles. It's about a family in southern Zambia, a father of 4, and how disheartened he had gotten because he could not provide for his family. But you guys not only provided the goats, you helped to train him on how to herd the goats, and that has completely transformed their whole family. You can read all about it. It's one of the cover stories in the magazine. His name is Caristo, I believe. Caristo. That article in there was so beautiful. And then you see them. Now he's herding goats. And
yeah, so many. Mm-hmm.
I know. I mean, these stories are incredible.
It's so funny, too, that we're talking about this with the gift catalog, where it just so happened that this past weekend, our family, which is now the 3 of us at the home, it's Naya, it's Colette, my wife, and myself, which is kind of sad with our 3 older children, Corbin, who's 21, and Haddon, who's 19, and Kai, who's 17, are now out of the house. But we were watching Babe, the movie Babe, where we got the animals are all talking, and we've got this pig who becomes a shepherd dog somehow. And my daughter loves animals. She actually sleeps in a bed full of stuffed animals. Stuffed animals are her favorite thing. So you can imagine that, as you were saying, so much of what we do as parents in teaching our kids generosity, yes, they are watching us all the time. They are seeing our lives, and are we living generous lives? So I have to first start just looking in the mirror and saying, what are you working on in my heart, Lord, in this space? Because I know that generosity is the currency of God's kingdom. It's not always just US dollars it's so much, it is about what is God doing in my heart to be generous, to extend people my time, to serve others. So they're watching us, while at the same time, the best way to learn is by doing it with us. And you were mentioning too, just talking through the gift catalog with our kids. And so you don't have to invite your son to come hike Mount Kilimanjaro with you. Because once I get back from the mountain, we come home, it's time to live our lives at the same time. So I'm challenged every day to continue that journey with my children, just the same as everyone else is. And the gift catalog came in the mail last week, and here we are at time to, talk it through. But I want her to choose. I don't want her to say, look at me, look what Dad's doing over here. I want to give them, empower them with that choice, so that she can choose the animals that's speaking to her heart, or, maybe it is vulnerable girls who we can support through our child protection programs or what have you. And our gift catalog has over 100 different options to choose from in there, which, rather than being overwhelmed with that, it's a journey of sitting down with your kids and letting them experience it and get to choose just the same.
I just love that. It makes me want to cry. I absolutely love that. It was just honestly one of the most special parts of my Christmas last year. And then when we talked about it again this year, it's just the kids were so excited about it. And I know my dad planted that seed in my heart when I was young, and my mom. They're extremely, extremely generous people. And as a result, I grew up seeing them always give. And there's one story I'll share in the conclusion a little bit later about my dad that just has always stuck with me. But it's just been such a blessing to pass that seed of generosity on to my kids. And, here we're all making our Christmas list, right? What do you want for Christmas? And so many of these things, like I got a laminator. Okay. Like a laminator. That is such a first world gift, like to laminate things. And great, it's going to help me with school, and I can laminate bookmarks and things. But, so many of the things that we get are just so far from being necessities, like another pair of boots or another sweater or something sweet and decadent to eat when, other people don't have like a nutritious meal. And getting our minds wrapped around that in the West is something that we need to not just do at Christmas time, we need to do throughout the year. And one thing I wanted to mention as well You have child sponsorship opportunities there where you can sponsor a child by giving every month, and it goes towards the well-being of that specific child. We've been doing this through another organization I got involved with about 20 years ago. It was a child sponsorship, and we've actually had several children. They age out at a certain point, but we'll get letters in the mail. I know that's how you operate at World Vision too. So if you sponsor a child, you sign up to do that, you will get pictures and letters in the mail from that child and have a connection to that child for the duration that they're in the program. I think the organization we use, it ages out at 18. Is that how that works with you guys?
Very similar, yeah, in most of our countries.
Yeah, talk about a little bit about child sponsorship, because I think, we get a letter in the mail, we can sit down with our kids and read from this child. We've been sponsoring in the Philippines. So talk a little bit about how that transforms a life through child sponsorship.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, once the child is sponsored and comes into our programming now, we're tracking all of their progress, whether it's how they're doing with their families, with their food sources, our education programs that are there in the communities, with the economic development that their parents can now participate in, whether it's the faith work that we're doing with local churches and in equipping local faith leaders there. And then on top of that, it is our clean water programs, our healthcare programs that are all there in the community, so that once the child is now integrated into those programs, they're now benefiting from all of those things, where our local field staff are now meeting with them and their families and seeing their well-being and ensuring that their well-being is kind of moving along through that process. And what is so great about it is your family now gets to build a relationship with that child, and it's writing letters. It's even online. You can use our app, and they can send you videos, and you can send them back messages and write them letters, and they do the same back for you. And you get to get a sense of how that family's doing. When I was in Tanzania this past summer with my son, we even got to be part of a program called Chosen, where instead of you going online and choosing that child to sponsor, you can actually let the child choose you. And so what ended up happening, we went to a Chosen party in the community there, and all the children it was at a school. They're all dressed up in their school uniforms. And, some of the children, you can tell, were better off, that maybe they had a newer sweater than the other child, and others, might have had a hole worn out in the elbow. But there was one child who she could not even afford a school uniform out of that group. And as they were lining up and looking at these different pictures of which sponsor that they were going to choose to be their sponsor, which is an incredibly powerful moment for a child who's never been given a choice in their entire life, to empower them with suddenly now they get to choose who they're going to begin having a relationship with. And who chose our family? None other than Joyce, who is that little girl who her family didn't even have enough money to pay for her to get a school uniform. And so started now a relationship with her, and we have gotten to pass, back all the things that you just mentioned with letters, but even getting to meet her and her sisters at the school that morning was an incredibly moving experience. And it's been child sponsorship has been very powerful for my kids and their family. We've always sponsored a child for each of our children so that they can have a relationship, almost like a pen pal in a lot of ways, with that child. And my older two boys have also gotten to go meet their sponsored children in Rwanda, where we were in those two situations, and changed their lives, incredibly, of how they see the world, how they see their situation, what we have here in the U.S., like you were talking about. And I'm so proud of them and what God's doing in their lives now as they've carried through those relationships over many years.
That is incredible. That is incredible that they've got to sponsor a child, each one of them, and actually got to meet them. That's phenomenal. I love that you offer all of those videos and the letters and just that communication. And when you have that as a child growing up, that is so critically important, especially in the West, where we're so insulated from what's going on in much of the world. I just think that's beautiful. That's an option you could do. You say, this Christmas, we're going to sponsor a child for the whole year actually you sponsor for years. You get to stick with that child until they age out of the system. And hopefully at that point, you've already transformed their lives and they're on a very different trajectory, which reminds me of, I mentioned earlier, your magazine should be sent out with a box of tissues. I sat down and we looked through the pictures with my kids and I was reading some of the stories to my kids. You had this wonderful article by Edgar Sandoval Sr., Bridge the Distance. This one really, really got me. You were talking about a young girl. He was talking about a young girl in this article named Rashida, who is 8, and she was escaping Sudan. And I think she had gotten to Chad. She had come with both of her aunts. She had 2 aunts and her grandmother. And so one aunt was holding her hand, 8-year-old Rashida's hand. The other aunt was carrying the grandmother on her back. Rashida had I believe it was 2 older brothers and a grandfather and her parents. She saw both of her parents had died. She experienced that. And her older brothers, tragically, her grandfather was sick and they took him to the local mosque and they took him out. The militants there took him out and shot him and then took her 2 older brothers out. And shot them. This is her life. And there's this beautiful picture of her and what was a bridge to nowhere in the Sudan crisis. They come over to Chad and they have this, it's such a striking metaphor because they have this bridge where everybody's hovered under trying to get out of the sun. And the bridge goes nowhere. It's just like it starts and stops. It doesn't connect anywhere. And that is such a metaphor for the lives of so many people that you help, that there's not a bridge. But the challenge is, we're the bridge.
Exactly.
We're the bridge. We're supposed to be the bridge of the gospel. And there's so many stories in here. There were stories from little boys in Mongolia. I didn't know anything about the Zud winters there. I actually went up. I was reading about that in your magazine. I started looking up what was happening in Mongolia. I didn't know. And I talked about it with my kids. They have very harsh winters. I believe it was 6 out of the last 10 winters were these Zud winters where I think it's just in the last couple of years, over 2 million livestock have died. And I was reading a story online about it where this man and his wife and his kids were inside their little dwelling and he knew something wasn't right outside. He had raised this herd of sheep since they were infants. And he went outside and everything was covered in like 3 feet of snow. And he realized that this herd that he had raised from the earliest moments of their life, they were all under the snow. They had all perished. Millions had perished. And that's their livelihood. That's their work. That's their sustenance. And, you just don't know about these things. And you have beautiful stories all throughout your magazine. There was another story about the cooking classes that you give in certain places. That was in Guatemala. Cooking classes to help parents understand how their children are sick and they don't know how to feed them nutritionally and get their hands on good vegetables and fruits and protein sources for their kids. I was just kind of blown away. I'm blown away. It's a beautiful testament of how we can be the bridge to these communities by sharing from what so often are excess, just our excess. Do we really need to go out to eat one more time this month? Do we really need that little weekend getaway trip? Do we really need to purchase more Xbox videos and ways to entertain ourselves when other people in other parts of the world have a bridge to nowhere that they're trying to crowd under and just get some rice and beans so they can live another day? So it's beautiful, beautiful work. In our closing moments here, I would love for you to share, I think I saw this online, your giving is very impressive in terms of your fundraising and management versus how much output you have. I put a graph in my notes. You've got like 8% of your revenue that comes in goes to fundraising, 3% to management. That leaves 89% of the funds that you receive going out to do the cooking classes, to provide the food sources, to educate, to protect girls who are being sexually exploited. That's a really great track record for giving. But what I also wanted you to just talk about, that you're not just meeting physical needs, you're meeting spiritual needs. This is all just as Christ did when he fed the 5,000. He fed their bodily needs so that he could feed a deeper spiritual need. Talk about how central Christ is and the gospel message is in the work that you do.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And I mean, Christ is at the center of what we do. When you think of the stories you're telling about Mongolia as an example, World Vision started the very first Christian radio station in Mongolia. So if you go in and listen on the radio in Mongolia and you are hearing the gospel, you are hearing music, it is the radio stations that World Vision started there. If you look at our clean water work as an example, I was meeting with a pastor in Rwanda just not so long ago, and he came to us and said, "Thank you so much for clean water, because before no one in my village wanted to be baptized. Who wants to be baptized in dirty water?" But now that has become a huge tool in my tool belt to invite people into life change and to receive the gospel so that they can be baptized in the clean water that we now have in our village. All of our clean water programs come with discipleship curriculum called Jesus, the Source of Living Water. And that really is what we're all about here at World Vision too. I mean, you had mentioned how Jesus calls us, and even in Matthew 25, where he says, what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And so if you're sharing that story of the girl in Sudan, I am seeing Jesus himself. He's there. He's inviting us under the bridge to come and serve him in the same way. And what I love about World Vision is it's, as I feel convicted to be a part of this, I'm invited into something that's actually very joy-giving and fun. When I sit down with my kids and go through the catalog, they're learning at how fun generosity can be, and giving them memories and planting seeds in their heart that are going to be more lasting than going out to eat one more time this month, like you were saying too. And so that's what I love about doing these seasons and inviting my kids to be a part of all these things that we do, is because it's a lot of fun too.
Hey, mamas and papas, we're spending a lot of money this Christmas, but wouldn't you like to get something for free? Well, I've got a lot of free resources for my subscribers over at CatherineSegars.com. I have scripture lists to pray over your children. I have a scripture list for couples who are struggling with pregnancy loss or infertility. I have a bookmark to keep in your Bible so you can pray over our leaders. I have a bundle of resources for prodigal parents and an ebook, Beyond the Lies, uncovering 5 myths our culture spreads to mothers. And they're all free, along with my weekly emails that will give you the inside scoop on every new episode of Christian Parent Crazy World, as well as transcripts. Don't forget those, and the lowdown on all my other interviews and articles. So head over to CatherineSegars.com. That's Catherine with a C, in order to become a CPCW insider. Now back to my interview with Brian Frazier. That is beautiful. And I hadn't even thought about that. What a witnessing tool that would be if you have a lot of communities that don't have clean water. Hey, these people over here have clean water so much that they're baptizing people in it. And let's go find out what's going on there. And then they hear the gospel message because this community has been touched by the mission that you have and the work that you're doing there. So I just think it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. And I'm so excited to be a part of that again this year with my kids, to go through your catalog and to encourage others. That's, I have a bit of a platform here, and I just wanted to plant these seeds.
Oh, I thank you so much.
And the parents, that I have a voice with, that this is the gospel in action. This is what we are called to do as believers, that we're called to transform a world. If we've been given so much here, that it's not it's not for an extra sweater or a pair of boots. And not that those things are terrible. I got some boots and sweaters this Christmas coming my way, I think. I'm not. Yes, we can bless our kids with wonderful things, but I think the best thing that we can give our kids this Christmas, one of the best things, is an opportunity to plant the seed of generosity in them, and at the same time do a work in another part of the world that desperately needs to hear the gospel. And how do they hear the gospel? The same way that Christ spread the gospel. He healed the sick and he provided for their needs. He fed them. He gave them dignity. he gave them hope, a hope for a different kind of future. I was reading another part of that article here. It was called Bridge the Distance. One of the things, we're bridging the distance between these parts of the world and our part of the world that is so affluent, but we're also bridging the distance. He ended it so beautifully in this article, bridging the distance between these kids and the dream of who they can be. One of the young girls, I think in that article, had a dream of being a pilot because she saw all of the planes coming in to drop off all of these supplies. And that was placed in her heart that she wants to become a pilot.
Amazing.
I know. Isn't that incredible that we can bridge the distance, obviously, between us, but also bridge the distance for Rashida and for other children who God places a dream in their heart. How is that ever going to happen? Well, the work that you're doing at World Vision is helping that to happen.
All of us.
Any closing thoughts you have there, Brian, that you would like to share?
Well, God is inviting all of us to be a part of that story. It's easy to hear about people and see their life stories and start to look into the mirror, but God is inviting all of us to be a part of this. And the story that you're creating at home with your kids is the story that God is writing just the same. And we would love for you to make World Vision a part of that story in each household.
Yes. Yes. So tell our listeners how they can learn more about you at World Vision and find this awesome giving catalog, or perhaps even find a child that they could sponsor throughout the year.
Yeah, please. So worldvision.org. And even if you just go in and search for World Vision, you're going to be brought to our website. You'll have a link there to look through the gift catalog online if you like. Sign up to get the magazines sent to your house too, just like Catherine, and begin that journey. You can take those opportunities too if you'd like to sponsor a child there. And you can see all of our financial statistics that Catherine had mentioned. We're 89% of all the funds you donate. And trust me on that. I am in budget meetings with our directors right now, and we operate on a tight budget. So you can see your impact firsthand and learn more about our work, all the things that we mentioned on today's podcast.
There you have it, moms and dads. This is the walking out of our faith. Thank you so much, Brian, for helping us to learn a very practical and fun way that we can do that as a family.
Thank you.
I had a final thought on the topic of giving. Now, this experience in giving has impacted my life for 35 years now. I learned the gift of generosity from my parents. They have always been so very generous. They were always giving to more charities and missionaries and mission organizations than I could count. They modeled giving for me throughout my childhood. But there was this one time when my dad made me a giver. It was right before Christmas, and this young man showed up at our house looking for work. At the time, there wasn't a lot of jobs out there, and he had been laid off, and he had a young wife and a child at home. But he had some skills, and he didn't want a handout. He wanted to work. So my dad hired him, and he did a really great job. And when it came time to pay, my dad paid him twice what they had agreed upon. But my dad didn't give him the check. My dad gave me the check to give to him. He brought me in on the experience, and I got to see this young man's face when he realized that he had received double what he was expecting right when he needed it the most. Sorry, I still get choked up about it when I think about that experience. I've never forgotten it, ever. It's, like I said, been 35 years, and I still think about it. It was the best feeling to be a part of that giving experience. That made such a huge impact on me and how I think about money. It made me a giver because I realized what a joy it is to give. It is truly better to give than to receive. And I learned that from my dad. Now, what I love about the gift catalog and sponsoring a child, whether that is through World Vision or another reputable organization or Operation Smile, that's another organization that I want to give to this Christmas. I'm not just plugging one organization. It's the principle of giving that I'm plugging here. But I just think that World Vision is one of the funnest and most creative and memorable ways to do that with your kids. They get to choose. They get to be a part of the giving, just like my dad made me part of the giving with that young man. And then you can educate them about other people and other cultures around the world. It's so awesome. These kinds of experiences are seeds that keep on bearing fruit for many years to come, for a lifetime even, and then for all eternity. So I encourage you to plant the seeds of generosity in your family this Christmas. I want to thank you for joining me today. Look, I know there are a lot of things you could be listening to right now, and I really appreciate that you took this time to spend with me. I hope you will join me for my next podcast when we take aim at some aspect of our culture that threatens to derail our parenting and steal our kids' faith. If you enjoyed this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World, would you consider telling a friend and sharing it on social media and giving it a good review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and following me on Facebook and Instagram? Oh, and maybe you could say that Christian Parent Crazy World is the best podcast you've ever heard in your entire life. Just a thought. And be sure to check out my website, which is CatherineSegars.com. That's Catherine with a C. I have lots of articles and resources there that will help you on your parenting journey. And if you subscribe, I will be sure to send you some really cool free stuff and notify you of future podcasts, articles, and blogs. I want to end this and every episode with a word of encouragement. God gave you your kids, your specific kids, for a reason. That's because you hold the key to unlocking who God created them to be. We'll see you next time.
Christian Parent Crazy World is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.
Hello, I'm Adam Comer.
And I'm Ryan Chittister.
And we are the host of Life After Addiction podcast. What we believe is that addiction is not a surprise to God.
That's right. We discuss addiction from a biblical worldview and how true freedom comes through a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Absolute freedom from addiction. The secular worldview of once an addict, always an addict is just not true. If you or someone you loved struggles with addiction, subscribe to Life After Addiction at lifeaudio.com.